behind every high mountain in the Highlands there are legends and stories, many of them true, and that's what brings me here to the source of Scotland's greatest river, the Tay, which discharges more water into the sea than any other British river. It rises on Ben Louis, and on one side of the mountains the streams go to the Atlantic. On the other side the streams flow east, reaching through the country known as Breadalbanes, the heights of Alba. And it's a country where history has been hammered out, and along its course the story of Scotland can be traced over 500 years. The first name we hear is St. Fillan, an Irish saint who came from the west to spread the word amongst the Picts along the course of the Tay, because that was the heart of Pictland, and that's where our journey begins. It's a bit more of a gentle glen now, and in early days folk pastured their cattle up here in the summer. Now above the river, which is called the Coninish but is really the Tay, there's a bit of a track serving a lonely sheep farm and forestry plantations. When St. Fillan came here in the 8th century, all this would be Caledonian pine forest, and the folk living in the clearings amongst it would have to watch out for wolves and brown bears. There's still an odd fragment of the ancient forest left above Coninish, but the most famous name associated with the source of the Tay is Robert the Bruce. That wee loch in a way commemorates him, for around it the ground is known as Dal Ree, the King's Field, a battlefield where Bruce narrowly escaped being killed 8 years before Bannockburn. His fortunes were at a low ebb then. He was in the run when his men were beset by the Clan MacDougall. 3 of them came at Bruce. He killed 2. The 3rd had a grip on his plaid and nearly threw him from his horse. Now, St. Fillan had been dead over 600 years when Bruce came here, but there was a monastery around where St. Fillan had a chapel, and it's believed that Bruce took sanctuary with the monks and was given the blessing of St. Fillan. Bruce believed that his escape at the hands of the MacDougall was because of that blessing, and he attributed his success at Bannockburn to a holy relic of St. Fillan. So these stones go back a very long time, but this graveyard tells us there must have been an even older foundation, for in the Roman Catholic Church a graveyard would be on the other side of the priory, the north side being reserved for evildoers. This raised mound in Glendochart with this stone in it is called Suie, and it's the Gaelic for seat, Fillan's seat, because when he moved from below Ben Louis, he was moving east to spread the Christian word. He used to gather people round him here, and of course he healed people as well. No doubt this seat had a special significance for the MacNabs when they made the small mound one of their burial places. Their clan name comes from Macanaba, meaning the children of the abbot. Apparently there were lay abbots 1,000 years ago who took wives and supported families, their progeny spreading from Dalmally west of Ben Louis right round past the priory of Strathfillan to the Dochart. And the Dochart was a river route of invasion. In fact, it was the way northward for Bruce after his defeat near Perth. To get here, he marched by Lochern and over Glenogle, turning left for the sanctuary of Fillan. but he found enmity instead, for the MacNabs joined with the MacDougals in the attack below Ben Louis. The MacNabs also fought against them at Bannockburn, and for that they forfeited their lands, but they were restored to them in 20 years, and the clan flourished. The present chief still lives in Culin, but his family is the only one with the name of MacNab today. St Fillan is better remembered, for until comparatively recently, on St Fillan's Day, no work was done on the 20th of January. St Fillan used to have a preaching place here at Culin. He's credited with building the very first meal mill on this river, which is the Tay, although here it's called the Dochart. And inside the mill are these stones in their traditional place. And it's reckoned these stones have been here for 1200 years. And there was always a hereditary keeper who administered the healing power of the stones. This one, for example, was for anything to do with the brain. If you had a mental illness or had terrible pains that were causing you agonizing trouble, the ritual was they were passed 3 times round your face one way, 3 times the other way. And whether it worked or not, we've no way of knowing. I suppose it would be a kind of faith healing. This one was for breast troubles in women. If it was applied to the breast, a cure could be expected. And if you had pains in the stomach, this flat one was rubbed round in a certain way. Pains in the back, this one, presumably because it looks like a backbone, so each stone had its purpose. Well, they're not used today, but the tradition is carried on of every Christmas Eve, the custodian of the stone comes to the riverside and he scatters the old rushes back into the river and collects new rushes, but they must have been cast up with the stream. They mustn't have been cut. Now we come to the family that was to become the most powerful in Scotland, the Campbells of Glenorchy, who come into the picture in 1432, when the ancestor of the Duke of Argyll gave his son Colin lands which had been forfeited from the MacGregors, and they raised this castle, Kilchurn, on an island at the head of Loch Awe. Its 5-storey tower was built while Colin was away on the Crusades. He was away for 7 years. He wasted no time on his return, expanding first of all to the lands near St Fillan's Priory, which he bought. Then came a grant of lands from the king at Lors and Loch Tay, from where he was able to consolidate by taking over the vital east end of Loch Tay, the port, where in time the Campbells built a castle where there had been a MacGregor castle. To say the family flourished would be an understatement. That castle of Ballach was built by Grey Colin in 1550, a forerunner to the splendid castle called Taymouth, lying empty today, but still a considerable monument to their wealth. Its interior decoration has been called some of the finest examples of Gothic art in Britain. Begun in 1801, it was completed in its present form on the eve of Queen Victoria and Albert's visit in 1842. Holyrood was considered to be too shabby for the royal couple. The Banner Hall, 50 feet long and with vaulted ceiling, shows the arms of the numerous families connected with the Breadalbanes. I wonder who was sitting in these seats on the most splendid night in the whole history of the Breadalbane family. It was an autumn night in 1842. The castle had been newly completed. The dining room was being used for the first time. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert must have been looking down
on the nobility of Scotland, who would be here? Well, there could have been a duke, maybe a choice of 3 duchesses, some marchionesses, at least 3 countesses, the Marquis. Well, there were so many folk here and so much going on outside because this was the first time in 20 years that the royal family had been to Scotland, and it was Queen Victoria's first visit. George IV had paid a visit 20 years earlier, the first visit by a reigning monarch for 150 years. And of course the Scots had a bad image after the 45. Now Queen Victoria was seeing this country and fell in love with it immediately. And she wrote in her diary that it was like a feudal lord of long ago receiving her sovereign. And that love for Scotland remained with her for the whole of her life.